Hey, can you guys hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Okay, now you can talk.
Hi, Maya. We can hear you. We're just working on setting up. We were having a few tech issues.
You're right with you.
That's totally fine. I'm also having tech issues. And so Savian may need to start the meeting just once you guys are done with the tech issues, because my internet keeps going in and out.
Yep, he's ready to go.
And can you hear me as well?
Yes. It's muted. Go.
All right, good evening. The time is 5:05. I will call this instruction work group meeting for May 9th to order. We have one public speaker who is with us tonight.
So she's actually not logged in yet, Sabian, so I'll keep trying.
Okay. Otherwise, we have no minutes to approve. So I will move us into agenda item 4.1, the wellness update. Dr. Esser, are you with us tonight?
I sure am. Hello, everyone. I also have Carrie Stampley here with me tonight. Would you like me to get started right away?
Please do.
All right. We'll be brief and succinct tonight, as I know you have a big agenda. My part of the presentation is simply the opportunity to thank Carrie and all of our school health staff, as it is National School Nurse Week. Wednesday officially is School Nurse Day. So I just want to thank Carrie for her leadership and all of our nurses, our nursing assistants and school health staff for all that they do in MMSD. So thank you, Carrie. I will turn it over to you to talk about less fun things like COVID cases.
Thanks, Leah.
You bet.
So unfortunately, our COVID case count continues to increase, just like it is in the county. As it usually does, we are following right along with our county increase in cases in our county. MMSD is experiencing the same thing. Our weekly case count in Dane County just today tipped over the 400,000 per 400 cases per 100,000 mark. That's the first time that that's happened. And so we are continuing to see elevated case counts in here. And we continue to do outbreak testing if needed. With that, for our community, we are still considered to be in a medium risk in regards to community level. The only way that that would convert into a high level is if our hospitals are impacted by the number of COVID cases. So meaning there are an increase in new admissions in the number of COVID cases, as well as the percentage of beds occupied by COVID patients in our hospitals. And we are not seeing that at this time. So we are in the medium risk. In regards to COVID testing, we are continuing to open new sites. We are hopeful that by the middle of May, all of our schools will have testing sites open on site. So we're really excited about that. The delay hasn't gone as quickly as we had hoped, only because of staffing issues. They are experiencing kind of the same staffing shortages that we are also experiencing right now. In regards to our vaccine clinics, we have a great partnership with the Public Health Madison-Dane County. At 3 of our elementary schools, we're holding vaccine clinics in the same time that our food pantry pickup is happening. And those have been really well received in the community. And so we're excited to continue those opportunities as well. And that is all I have for my update. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nurse Carrie. Any questions from board members? Board Member Simpkin?
I have two questions.
So let's turn off your,
It is
and in your Zoom also. Yep,
Okay.
stay mute.
okay, and now I can be heard. Okay, I have two questions for you. The first is, will the COVID testing sites, is the plan for those to remain open after school is done? So, i.e. in the summertime.
Yeah, so our plan is that all of our summer school sites will have testing open. The funding and the use of this testing vendor has been approved through the end of July. And we know we will have some type of testing in schools program for next school year. We just do not have the details of explicitly what that's going to look like.
Okay, and then my second question is, who can access these? Are these open to the public, or are they only for people in the schools?
So as of right now, our sites are set up as private sites. They're not public, open to the community. But who can be tested is our staff and students. Anyone with strong partnerships. So that would include like our bus drivers. So Metro bus drivers and our Badger bus drivers are able to access testing, as well as any family members of our MMSD students.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Board Member Gomez-Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for continuing to update us on the conditions in MMSD and our mitigation strategies. One thing I'm curious about is our daily symptom screener. Has that changed recently as far as what we're asking parents to complete? And can you give us an indication of what level we're at with the symptom screeners and the testing that we're doing? I've just read this week in the data snapshot that Dane County in general is doing a lot more testing than the rest of the state of Wisconsin, but because we're at those levels are higher, but the rate of testing is also higher. So I was just curious if you can update us a little bit on our symptom screener and our testing.
Sure. So our symptom screener, we have not made any changes to our symptom screener as of yet. Our plan is most likely going to be that we'll roll out those changes probably with summer school. Our very talented IT team at MMSD built us a new screening app, so we aren't reliant on an outside vendor for our screening process. So our hope is that we'll roll that out probably for the start of summer school. It's just been a complicated process, and to get everything translated, it's much more dynamic. So we're really excited, but I don't think we'll be rolling that out. So our screener is going to stay the same for right now. So that means that people will get a daily email and a reminder to please stay home if you're sick. And if you have COVID symptoms or are a close contact or have tested positive, we want you to fill out that screener. And then somebody from our contact tracing team will give you a call to make sure that you know what the next steps are. We are seeing a very high increase of that screener usage as well. As our case numbers go up, obviously our number of people that are testing positive as well as experiencing symptoms has been increasing. We have been able to call everybody that fills out a screener, but we are close on a daily basis to working into the evening to try to get those all done with a big team of people making those phone calls, including our health services staff.
Okay. Thanks, Carrie. I'm just wondering, as the weather gets warmer and allergy season is starting to hit in full force, is there a way to tease out, like, for those students who have seasonal allergies, if this is going to be like a continuing thing that they have to deal with? Is there a way for school nurses to work with parents and families to tease that part out?
Yeah, our policy is, if they start having symptoms, we're going to ask everyone to get tested, because you can't tell if it's COVID, if you've got a stuffy nose or having other symptoms of allergies, which people might have. After you get your test result back, as long as that is negative and your symptoms don't change and they don't worsen, or you don't get any new symptoms, you're able to come to school and you don't need further testing. We would ask for people to get repeat testing if your symptoms change. If they stop and then they restart back up again, we would ask, or if they change, we would ask people to get tested for that.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I appreciate that, because I just think that's going to be an ongoing issue for a number of students, and appreciate you explaining that, that the change in symptom is really the difference there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just want to say appreciation for all of the metrics team, and we have really been grappling, with some proposed changes and when to pivot and the mask issue that we announced. And I just want to say that I hope we continue to keep working on what indicators we're going to use to actually make that pivot and that change. And I just want to say thanks to Dr. Dinkins for having the flexibility to say that we're going to continue to discuss and monitor the situation as we go forward. Thanks.
Any other board member questions or comments? All right, thank you so much, Nurse Carrie and Dr. Jenkins and the whole medical team. We've really appreciated your consistent leadership, having a steady hand in keeping our school community safe and having a watchful eye on the conditions as they shift and change, but also keeping the health and consistent expectations at heart. So thank you. Transitioning to our next discussion topic, which is 5.1, the academic plan update. Cindy, are you here with us tonight?
I am. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Board Member Castro. Oh, sorry, I see Michelle's got.
Do we have the West sale on 4.1?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Cindy, is there someone on hand for the West Sale program that was listed under 4.1? Or will that?
Yeah, that is part of tonight. We can either start with that or we can end with that, whichever way you would like to go.
Okay, let's start with that.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask Nancy Molfenter and Nelson Render to also just be on screen as we talk about the West Sale program. So board members, you should have received a memo that outlines all of the work done to date around our SAIL program that is for students that attend West High School. This was provided after we had a conversation at the April regular board meeting where there were some questions about this programming and a shift in location. I will just provide a high-level overview and then I will turn it over to Nancy Molfenter and then we will also open it up for questions. So just to provide some background, SAIL is currently housed at our Hoyt building that is also used for MSCR. As you know, that building is about to undergo construction starting in July as we are super excited that will become the new Capitol High School. And so with that, both MSCR and the SAIL program have to shift out of that location. We have been working directly with the West staff for quite some time, all this school year on a regular basis, to think about other spaces for that program. With that, I will turn it over to Nancy just to provide a little more detail of what was in the memo and then open it up.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing this time for some additional information to be provided. There were a few details that I didn't get an opportunity to share with you during the April board meeting. And so that was some of the information that we included in the memo. One of the things I wanted to make sure was clear was that SAIL is a program that West offers just for scholars with an IEP. So that's a little bit different than some of our other alternative programs that are open to all scholars. And historically, until this point in time, central office has not gotten involved at all in identifying locations. And over the past couple of years, knowing that Hoyt was no longer going to be available, we really have wanted to support West and the staff there in continuing this option. And so we've provided some support in the ways that are described in the memo with looking at spaces, pricing out spaces, thinking about what could potentially work instead. So currently, Student Services supports paying a portion of the La Follette alternative program for scholars with an IEP, and that's the only thing that we're currently funding, and that was not a location that we had anything to do with identifying. So we in no way from central office or student services are intending to tell West where to be. So finding that space or working with MSCR to partner was again, as I said last time, to provide an option. Also wanted the Board of Education to be aware that because we've had all of our high schools seeking alternative options for scholars with an IEP at the high school level, we did create a program earlier this year at our Holtzman Learning Center. So we have a small number of scholars at every level who are offered alternative programming when their IEP team determines that that is necessary to meet their disability-related needs. So that is a new option that we are offering this year that is available and has been utilized by some West scholars. So those were just some points that I think we didn't get an opportunity to talk about in April that I wanted to share from the memo.
One additional thing I will mention, and then I will turn it back to Board Member Castro, was that we also have been working with Cedric Hodo and our realtor to examine and look at all of the real estate that is available in walking distance from West High School to determine if anything from that vantage point might be of interest to West. So we've definitely done a few analyses over the last few months with that as well. And that was outlined in the memo for you as well. So I will turn it over to you, Board Member Castro, to see if there are questions, and we're all here to provide whatever responses we may be able to.
Got it. Thank you. And I see Board Member Vandermolen with your hand up, and then all others.
Yes. Several questions. Thank you, Maya, for putting this on the work group, and thank you, Savan, for introducing it. Secondly, I'm happy to hear there are alternatives outside of being 4.5 miles away, as I don't believe Holzman is appropriate, being that part of the program is to spend half the day at the public school, and I think transportation, especially with shortages, would be an issue. My main concern is to keep sale as close as possible, and that would be right now from what it looks like Bethel. I understand that this is religious. The reason I'm suggesting it is this. One of the major components of sale is to have it walkable for students and for students to get there. I really feel it's necessary as an equity issue. Yes, these are 12 students, but these are 12 of our students. And I think that they have the ability and they should have the right to be as close as possible to their home school. In fact, IDEA actually has the assumption of not just a least restrictive environment, but has the assumption that that mainstreaming as much as possible or the closest equivalent. This is incredibly close, and it would be doable with our staff. My other request is that the board be able to vote on this. This is a major educational issue and placement. Yes, I understand the IEP team determines placement. However, the home of the program is something the board has the ability to be involved in. And I think that really needs to be done. And I've been speaking, I spoke to Emily Desai, who's one of the people who works at the SAIL program. And I've spoke to several of the disability members in the community who've all been very supportive of having SAIL close, not far away. But my one question that I have outside of comments is how many individuals with openly identify as disabled, if you know, were involved in the decision on SAIL?
Thank you, Nikki. I can take that question. I think I understand it correctly. So there hasn't been a decision made. I mean, the decision that the Hoyt building is no longer an option, that I do not know the answer to. So I don't know about when the decision was made that Hoyt would be renovated to become the new Capitol High School. But in terms of a decision of where the program would move, there hasn't been any decision made. And so, but I had the exact same question after the last meeting. So I so very much appreciate that you raised it, because the location that Student Services has secured in partnership with MSCR's move I don't know that scholars have actually been offered that as an option. So I agree with everything you're saying. I mean, I think you and I have talked enough that you know that I actually would love to have all of our scholars in their home schools full time and not anywhere else. But that sometimes disability related needs create the need for us to offer something a little bit different for a period of time. But I would like to know what scholars think as well, because I think for some scholars who may have a job after their morning of school, if they're seniors on track to graduate and they want a job, that might actually be an opportune place. So I have the same exact question.
Actually, if I may say, Van, can I please respond? Because I actually know it. Because Mike Jones of the union asked them and sent an email with it to the board with students' requests from the SAIL program. May I share that email with the board?
Board Member Vandermillen, if you want to share it with us via email, otherwise
Yes.
summarize it with your comments, but otherwise those are your options.
I can summarize it with my comments. If I could just have 1 second to pull it up, it would be well appreciated. I have fat thumbs, so it takes slightly longer.
Okay, we do have other board members in the queue, so I just want to be mindful of the time.
Here it is. He writes on April 25th, I'm writing in support of SAIL. I'm very biased because I've worked with some of these students when I was dean, still personally involved in their success. Many of these students were impacted disproportionately from COVID. The following are statements that these students wanted to give about why they wanted to stay in the Hoyt building along with Capitol High or in a location as close to West as possible. And it states, if I have to travel to another location via bus, I might as well go home. I have classes at West. I want to stay close to my friends and teachers. I'll get distracted by being out by the mall and I'm worried I'll get in trouble. No one will be on a bus out there and that's a longer bus ride home. And it's a lot easier to get one-on-one help here and close to West with my classes. And if I have to take more buses for extracurriculars and put me behind with my coaches, it'd be stressful. That's the only email I have.
Got it. Thank you, Board Member Vandermillen. Moving on to Board Member Nichols.
Yes, I want to. Okay.
Mute yourself.
So mute both your machine and Zoom.
They are.
Okay.
And I'm
If you're
good.
not in YouTube either. Can't be in YouTube.
You don't turn your mic on to talk. You can just
Right.
talk.
Got it. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the detailed memo. And I think I am also in agreement with Board Member Vandermeulen about concerns and really a hope to keep SAIL as close to West as possible. So I have a couple of questions, and let me just also say that, you know, as a parent, previously with sons in the district, I had a son that actually had an IEP, attended West High School in the morning, went to SAIL in the afternoon, and walked back to West to participate in sports. And the proximity of the program to West was really critical. And also just from an adolescent development stage, because he was a junior or a senior, I can't remember which, he was able to start at West and kind of slip down the road to go to SAIL, get the kind of individualized attention he needed, and then come back without it causing a major stigma for him. So I feel like the proximity of the program to West is really critical. So in reading your memo, there are a couple of questions that I have, and maybe you can help just illuminate a few of the details. I understand that you are saying that your department doesn't really get involved in the high school level decisions about where these alternative programs will be located, with the exception of the one program at La Follette. And so I'm wondering, in this case, because Hoyt, MSCR and SAIL have to move out of the Hoyt building, it's part of a larger referendum initiative. What is the criteria for perhaps intervening from your department to help ensure that students at West who need the SAIL program can access it without relative burden on access and distance? That's the one question, just wanting to better understand criteria for when your department would intervene. And then the second question is related to the cost analysis of property and real estate. And that question is, there's a paragraph in the memo that is talking about the annual rent would be approximately $60,000 per year. And then potentially some remodeling budget as well. What I want to better understand is, was West paying any rent to MSCR for having classrooms in the Hoyt building? Or was that like an in-kind cost? And how does that compare to looking at any of the alternative spaces that might be available? And I'll stop there before continuing.
Thank you very much, Board Member Nichols. I'm really excited to hear that your son found SAIL to be helpful and successful. That's, I mean, it's, you know, and the proximity to sports was important. That's really good. And Board Member Vandermeulen, I really appreciate the information that you shared from scholars. I had not been provided with any of that information, so it was really helpful for me to hear that. So I'll answer the first question and then pass it on to Mr. Render. That the criteria, so even the space at La Follette, that Student Services splits the cost with La Follette, we did not get involved in identifying the space. So really, this was the first time with West SAIL that I'm aware of that Student Services and other members of the central office support team have been involved, because I guess that answers the question about what was the criteria, that recognizing that there was space that was available for this purpose for an extended period of time, that was in a district building, and that the space was being lost for a reason that had nothing to do with the success of the SAIL program, right? It was, I mean, it's obviously, you know, to support Capitol High and their growth, which is wonderful, but we recognized as a district office that also had a negative impact on scholars from West and West staff. So that's why we've been involved in trying to identify space. And really the primary reason why we're offering the option of the space near West Town, if nothing else suitable can be identified between now and the start of the next school year as a potential option temporarily. So I would say that was the criteria, was that recognizing that it was an obligation that we have to ensure that all of our scholars have access to the services they need in a location that meets what's best for them and their disability related needs.
And for your second question, Board Member Nichols, I'm going to ask Mr. Hodo and Ms. Dyer if they are on here. I do not believe there's any rent paid since MSCR is part of MMSD and it was a building space, but I see Janet on here, so I'm going to let her answer that second question, and then we can provide an update on the analysis of the space if needed.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. I'm happy to do that. SAIL did not pay rent for space at Hoyt, nor did MSCR. However, at our new locations, both of them, MSCR will be paying rent. And so whether it's SAIL or perhaps another alternative program that's at our MSCR West location, we're hoping that because that space would be taking away from a space where we would be able to generate revenue. So we would be hopeful that there could be some of that lease cost paid by whichever alternative program uses that space.
And Board Member Vandermiller, I'll add on to it. I think from building services side, we have been working very closely with student services just to ensure that these things are actually looked at. From my vantage point, timing is critical for us. The referendum is on a very tight schedule. We're looking to actually begin, initially our starting point was to begin sometime in July, summer, for soft construction as we rolled into the August month, heavy construction. Contingent upon heavy construction, we have to have a place by which to place Jen and her team. It's going to take us roughly about a month to two to get them transitioned into the new location, MSCR West, and to move everything that's needed for them to start up day one come August. So that's very critical for us. Once Jen and her team has a location, we'll begin the heavy demo construction, which will probably begin in the fall of this year, 22. The key for us, for the sales students, I think it's critical for us from a path perspective to make sure that there are occupancy codes that has to be met, fire safety evacuation plans, a lot of permits that have to be done whenever you're putting students into a new or rental building space. So cooking, ADA accommodations. So Board Member Vandermiller, I understand your vantage point. That same walk that you had with us when we looked at the locations from ADA accessibility, we would do the same thing at any location that's charged. And building services, of course, will have to probably foot the bill on a lot of these. We're hopeful that we can find a reasonable cost attached to it. But we're certainly on board to doing whatever we need to do. But I would just strongly urge the board, we are on a very tight time schedule, and keeping the referendum on target, I think, is critical for us.
All right, and board members, our public speaker is available now. Is everyone okay if we allow our public speaker to make their appearance?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Martha. We're ready to take your statement.
I think she's connecting.
Thank you very much. I apologize for getting my times incorrect. I was just over at James Wright, listening to all our teachers. Okay. Well, again, thank you again for letting me say this. I'm representing Mantel Mamas. I know you guys had some discussion tonight about Sail West, and that's what I wanted to speak on tonight. Mantel Mamas is a peer-to-peer support group for families who have students with disabilities. We help them navigate obstacles to which most people have no idea exist, and we serve as a support system because we share their life experiences. Today, you guys are addressing a change to the program called Sail West. SAIL stands for Student Achievement Through Individualized Learning, and West refers to the West High School. And it's a program that's highly beneficial to students with disabilities. SAIL helps students with disabilities with individualized instruction and their rights to the least restrictive environment provided for while they are currently located within or near, in this case, their home school. This program has an immeasurably positive impact on its participants. Right now, the location of SAIL West is at the White Building, that is within 5 minutes of walking distance of West. And tonight there's on your agenda, it seeks to change the location of these vital resources that what they have to offer without engaging people fully on the school board, the teachers and the families that it would affect. While ideally would be within West High School campus, there is a proposal to move it to the east side of Madison, which is not only a 15-minute drive away, that's also without traffic and then all the transitions that need to happen in the middle. Transitions for kids who are already having a difficult time at school can be crucial to how their day is successful. And then we have to think about how many different people are going to be interacting with them too. All of that can be, let's just call it traumatic, because everybody's getting used to somebody else. And we know that the teachers are probably not going to continue over there with them. This is unacceptable because the move would infringe on the rights of these students to a free and appropriate public education. Sequestering students with disabilities in a building so far away from their community is segregation. And let's not forget where we have some other programs. LEAP and Neon, they're no longer in buildings. They're in a completely separate location. You cannot endanger hard fought for disability rights without a transparent discussion with folks whose lives are affected by your decisions. We urge you to be open and to alternate locations in the same neighborhood of West High School. And we ask that the board move any agenda items relating to sale to a vote for everybody to have input on. Because this is something that's really important and people need to know where this program is actually going to go, considering all the changes that are happening within the Hoyt building for the upcoming years. In fact, there's been brought to our knowledge that there is a location that's available and already vetted by MMSD staff that we ask you to consider very seriously. And that it's a Bethel location that's right within the same community. And it was actually suggested by one of the staff from West High School. As a disability advocate, I want every child to feel that they know that they're welcome, valued, and included every single day. And if you guys feel the same way, I have to agree that the future regarding Sail West has more to be discussed and discovered.
Thank you, Martha, and that is 3 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, and so in the queue, I have Board Member Nichols, Board Member Simpkin, Board Member Gomez Schmidt, followed by Board Member Vandermolen. Go ahead.
Can I just do one follow-up, please?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And then I'll make sure I'm leaving time for my colleagues. So, Mr. Hodo, thank you so much for, again, stating the timeline on our referendum and construction of Hoyt. My issue isn't so much about the timeline around MSCR and sale or that whole building needing to be emptied in order to keep the construction timeline on track. My question was more in the memo about the $60,000 per year that was stated for annual rent. And I think that's for 2 potential spaces or a couple of spaces that maybe have been looked at. And I'm wondering, now hearing that West had not paid rent prior for the sale program, is that rent cost something that either student services could go in on like they're doing for La Follette, or could the remodeling budget of any said space that's in closer proximity be a one-time cost that could be put on ESSER? I guess I'm trying to look at how might the 2 options that we were provided for First Baptist Church and Bethel space become a stronger possibility. And I don't know if that's for Mr. Hodo or if that goes back to Ms. Molfenter.
Dr. Onfinger, I can take a stab at it, and then you can more than welcome to come. As far as budgeted, is there an additional cost that was associated to sale within building services budget? No. There is a long-term path, I believe, the Gammon Road property, which is approximately 120K. They have 1 more year left on that on lease. That will be the savings back to the district. In other words, it'll be a net washout if we look at it from that perspective. But from a budget perspective, no. And typically building services will have to absorb this. I would also alert the board the renovating costs or that's attached to getting the students and the occupancy permits will probably be an additional cost. I don't know the ADA accessibility of this location, but all of those things typically fall under building services. And I'll work very closely with Ross and our county team to find a path if that's the direction we decide to go.
And then I can quickly just share with the board that Student Services has already had conversations with West High School, indicating that we would be willing to help with rent up to $20,000 a year for this program. So that's a conversation that we have had, and so that's our commitment.
Thank you.
Board Member Simpkin.
Thank you. I think I want to start by acknowledging that some of this conversation is related to school autonomy, and some of it's related to least restrictive environment for our students. And I am a huge proponent of school autonomy, and I don't want to step on that. One of the things that I haven't been hearing so far is any large voice from West High School regarding what the teachers and the administrators in the SAIL program want to tell us. And so that's something that I would like to hear. Another piece of what I'm thinking about is related to least restrictive environment. And so my understanding is that for the students who qualify for the SAIL program, it is considered a least restrictive environment for them to be in proximity to the high school, but not at the high school. So in other words, to have a more calm, quiet environment for a portion of their day. And so when we're thinking about the balance between school autonomy and letting the school or the administration choose the location, I think we also have to keep in mind, are we making sure that we're choosing an environment that is going to be the least restrictive environment for these students? And in this case, I have strong concerns around the idea of the least restrictive environment possibly being an environment in which the students are far from the high school that they belong to. And so I would like to take that option off the table. I'm not hearing anybody really excited about that. All I'm hearing is that it's sort of the last choice, where if nothing else can happen. But to me, by putting our students 4.5 miles away from the high school, we are providing them with an inappropriate setting for their needs because they won't be able to access the high school. And so I guess that's my 2 comments. My last comment is actually related to the issue of funding. Funding is obviously incredibly important, but I just want to point out that when we're talking about the needs of our students who have disabilities, funding cannot be the reason why we make a decision for them. We have to first consider what is most appropriate and in their best needs. Thank you.
All right, and Board Member Gomez-Schmidt.
Thank you. And thank you for the memo that you provided. When we last discussed this, I was very interested in understanding the larger context of the different offsite programs we had that were associated with each of our high schools and additional programs. So I appreciate that. I guess one of the things I'm doing, taking a step back from this, is, when I add up the total numbers of students served in all these different programs, we have it's at a minimum over 100 students in all these different locations. And so I guess going forward, one of the things I would like us to take a look at as a board is how we are measuring how these programs are serving students. And additional information as far as for how long are students accessing these programs, how are we measuring progress or measuring if it's a positive experience for these students. One of the things that I've heard anecdotally is that these smaller programs work really well because they keep the students connected to their home high school, but it provides a smaller learning environment where the students don't quite get so lost and they have more individual attention. And so like the other board member said, I very much support having the West SAIL program closer to West. I know one of the options that was potentially mentioned was having it within West High School, and looking ahead at all of the referendum construction we have and having portions of our buildings already not usable for the next 2 years, just for the regular student population. I just don't think that's an option or a possibility. So I would really encourage us to take a look at this. I think maybe one thing that might help the board as we're looking at this, the review and cost analysis of the properties, it's kind of all mashed together in the average size of the spaces and the average rent and potential remodeling budget. So, I mean, I guess if we're using, let's say Temple Beth El, which has been suggested, I don't think we're going to be remodeling their space when we rent it. So I guess, could we get a further analysis of the different options, the square feet, the rent for each one, and those kinds of details that we can kind of look at those side by side? Is that a possibility? Or do you just need us to give you direction to say we want something closer to West High School as an option?
Well, I mean, I would just say that it's absolutely what everybody wants to see happen. And it's been the goal ever since we knew that Hoyt wasn't going to be available. So I think it's a very common goal for everyone in this meeting and beyond, to find a space so that students can walk back and forth and not have to travel by a vehicle. I will say that no matter where any of our alternative programs are, La Follette's is actually not walkable to their space, but we provide transportation so that we always want our scholars to have connection and spend time and take classes in their home schools, regardless of which of our alternative programs for students with a disability they're involved with. So that's always the goal. So I think we have a common goal there. I think it's just finding a space that's suitable that hasn't come to fruition yet. I don't think anybody's giving up, though. I certainly am not.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little to that, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt. Based on the conversation on the April monthly board meeting, it was asked to just have a further dialogue around that, which is what we just wanted to do, was provide an update as we're continuing to work with the West staff and supporting them with securing a location and also transitioning from the Hoyt building. So from our perspective, that was kind of our goal for tonight, and allow more questions from your group.
Great, thank you so much. And it does feel like people are on the same page as far as wanting that to work for West and wanting it to work for the students, and continue to try to find the best option possible for the school year ahead. So appreciate it. Thank you.
And Board Member Gomez-Schmidt, if you don't mind, if I could add just one thing to Cindy's comment, and to Board Member Simpkins. We've been working on this probably a year now, and I think we're definitely all on the same page. We want the best for our kids. I think from the upfront cost of getting the building, in whatever building we choose, and getting it prepared for student occupancy is very important. Boards, TV, IT, electrical upgrades. There's a lot of things that it will take, cafeteria tables. There's some things that it will take to get the building ready for occupancy. That's very critical, and I think that we should factor that in the overall decision.
Okay, thank you. And I really appreciate that. And maybe an analysis of each one. And there's probably those spaces, whether they're retail or they're other, educational use spaces, there'll be a range there as far as what the investment would need for us to get the spaces ready. So I do appreciate you lifting that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Jenkins, do you have anything?
I was just going to say thank you to Ms. Green and the team. We just wanted to come back and get an update, but I think you still have a hand. I think I saw Ms. Pearson's hand up, but we just wanted to get an update, and we can come back with more information. I think you've given us some things too to consider tonight. As Mr. Hodo said, we've been working on it for a while, and we all want the same thing. Let's leave here knowing that. We want the best thing for our scholars, and we think proximity, we know that's always best. Thanks for lifting the La Follette situation, because it's not the same, and it's never always the same, but we want the best for our scholars. And so we'll come back again after we look into some more of these things that have been brought up tonight. But I think you still had.
Yep, I see, yeah. And Board Member Vandermolen.
Yes, two questions. One, I want to lift up what Laura Simpkins said. She's absolutely right. On LRE, if you read the principles IDEA, cost is not supposed to be a factor. Read the case law by DEA going all the way to 2018, it says cost cannot be a factor in the least restrictive environment. Not choice, cannot. Secondly, I just want to thank you for putting this on a work group. But I request that the board be the ones making the final decision, as these 12 students in this program. I think the future of the program depends on the location, and I request that the board be able to do a vote on it.
Got it. Thank you, Board Member Vandermolen. And last comment question is from Board Member Pearson, who is having internet connectivity issues, but is still with us via audio.
I'm gonna try to see if my camera works. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I may have to turn it off halfway through my comments. I just wanted to I guess, kind of wrap this conversation up, because on one hand, like we all are I think we've all are saying the same thing. I think us putting this on the agenda and making sure this was via request from our last board meeting. And so I just want to make that very clear that this is an update. And I am in agreement with Cindy, just, having the questions that come from this and just keep following up and keep us in the loop as we go further. I'm not sure, Nikki, how we fit in your pieces, but I guess that would be a conversation, your requests, that would be a conversation that we'll have to have with Ali and the team on if this lives in the instruction work group later, if we want to keep having this conversation around SAIL. Now, what I also want to just be mindful is that SAIL is not the only program. And so I want to make sure that we're, not only giving our attention to SAIL because of the unfortunate circumstances of having to find a space because of the building renovations. And then I also just wanted, my last comment is just keep in mind that no matter what choice we have or we make, if it is a year somewhere, we will still have to move our children again. So I think that the team is really outweighing all the options, not only for a permanent home, but also in the in-between time. And obviously we know that moving children multiple times is not the best for anyone. But I just want to just keep that context in mind. So even if we were to have a temporary space, we will still have to move the children to a new space. So just so that we kind of understand that. But thank you all for the robust conversation around this. And I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation and get the questions and have some of the comments that were made. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you, Board Member Pearson. And just to close us out, to build off that comment, the primary reason why we're having this conversation is because the referendum will be renovating the Hoyt building. And so therefore we will need a temporary 1 year replacement. But I want us to have that more broad perspective in that we did not engage this conversation around the Follett, who those students have to take a bus ride and drive to and from their SAIL location. And so, if just keeping that equity broader picture in mind and not being captured in the moment. All right, thank you. And then moving on to the academic plan update 5.1.
Thank you so much. Barb, would you like me to share my screen, or would you want to share your screen before we get started?
We're ready to do it, Cindy. Jesse's driving.
All right, Jesse, thank you. Wonderful. Could you go to the next slide, please? All right, as we start off tonight's presentation around the academic plan, we have quite a few buckets here, but we thought it was really important to begin to center our scholars as we continue to think about other ways to demonstrate their brilliance. And so I want us to pause here. I will turn this over to Dr. Jenkins and Mr. Harvey to just highlight the brilliance of our young people as we think about the shift in our academic plan, and specifically our student Zamarian Wallace here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Green, for how we're going to start this presentation off with one of our scholars. Our scholars come to us so balanced, more than just test scores. They're so well-rounded within our district and within our community. So we're going to celebrate one of our scholars tonight, and I'll give the pleasure of doing that to Mr. Harvey, but I also want to say thank you to Board Member Pearson, because as we see the instructional group taking on a lens of its own, how we want to do the academic recalibration, how we want to start centering students in this instructional discussion. I have to really give a lot of credit to her for her efforts in working together as a team to say, how can we co-create this space for all of our learners? And thank you to all the board members for allowing this space and letting us stay focused. And thank you to all the board members. The unanimous vote on our resources, which is like the largest investment in early literacy in over 20 years. You know, I want to thank you, the path that we're on. Thank you for letters. Thank you for believing in the science of reading. Thank you for doing EL and benchmark. This is huge. And I think as we continue to go, we want to make sure we keep our scholars at the center. So thank you, Board Member Pearson, for doing that. And thank you, Ms. Green, for the way that you're leading this charge. Now, Mr. Harvey, please.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Good evening, everyone. It is always a pleasure to honor and acknowledge our scholars here in the district, and we take great pride in doing that. Zamarion Wallace is a fourth grade Frank Alice student. He is celebrated consistently by showing high levels of maturity, responsibility, and self-advocacy. While having skills and thinking far beyond his age and or grade level, Zamarion regularly contacts transportation for himself to check on the rides that the school provides. If the ride is running late to pick him up, he will call the transportation company himself to check on the status. Several times this year, Frank Alice staff and MMSD Transportation have been notified by our community transportation partners, and they describe Zamarion to us as well-mannered and appreciative. One MMSD transportation colleague stated, "He just melted my heart," after he called to check on the status of a ride one morning. Zamarion has regularly persevered in tough situations. The phrase, "I got this," is spoken regularly from him, and he's always willing to tackle challenges head on. This year, he also is a member of the Frank Alice group, Black Boy Joy. He represents his family, himself, his school, and his basketball team with pride, honor, and joy each and every day. He makes us better people by knowing him. I'd like to present to you all Mr. Zamarion Wallace.
Unfortunately, Zamarion and his mom could not be here tonight. We had asked them to join us, but they could not be here. What I will ask is that you hold Zamarion's brilliance and his story in your head as we go through tonight's presentation. And as we're really thinking about how we are shifting, how we want to become a liberated school district, and how we are shifting our thinking around some of the work of the academic plan to recognize the brilliance in all of our young scholars that come into MMSD. So with that, Jessica, you go to the next slide. Our MMSD vision. Again, Zamarion just definitely uplifts this vision. Next slide, Jesse, please. And our goals, again, how we think about the brilliance in our young people outside of just goal one, but in all of our goals. And definitely our core values. I think Zamarion, again, is representative of how we want to uplift our core values every day. All right, so our outcomes for tonight under the academic plan are first discussing the state of our state requirement of what we call the at-risk plan, and then some updates around our input sessions thus far on the academic plan, and we're excited to also provide an update around the Summer Arts Academy. As we all know, we just had the update on Sail West, so that one check is done, and we will end the night by previewing what we will be discussing in June. So I'm going to start us off here, and then I'm going to turn it over to our Associate Superintendents of Middle School and High School, Dr. Angie Hicks and Mr. Render. We are going to provide an update on track for graduation. The language that DPI uses is at risk of not graduating plan. I want to state that we reject this language, and we really want to rethink not only the language that we use, but the behaviors and the actions that undergird that, and how we are supporting our students holistically and thinking about the brilliance of all of our students while having to also adhere to some of our state requirements. We also know that the Board of Education has asked to have a more proactive conversation around this plan prior to it coming to you in July, when you have to do your annual approval. So I just wanted to remind the board that this is an opportunity for us to have more of a dialogue and conversation before this will come back to you in July for actual approval. If you could go to the next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Render.
All right, thank you, Cindy. And again, good evening, board members. Good evening, Dr. Jenkins and our MMSD community. Again, this evening, I'll just be sharing with you briefly some information about the at-risk graduation plan according to DPI. And its alignment to our goal number one, which is that every scholar will be on track to graduate ready for college, career, and community. The plan, what it overviews, it defines a process for identifying students who may need additional support to graduate high school. Our central office supports schools in their implementation through options, tools, and resources. And our departments support our schools through providing guidance around interventions, supports, and targeted to those scholars who are in need. And our after-action reviews are conducted annually to reflect and to adjust. And again, as Cindy just stated, the Board of Education will approve this on an annual basis, and it's consistent with the statutes from DPI. Next slide, please. The intention for this process is to be grounded in a multi-tiered system of supports for all of our scholars to have access to interventions, including our scholars with IEPs, to have options to get support so they can get back on track to graduate. Also is to make sure that our school level collaborative approach is to develop a plan to address the reasons for those scholars who are at risk, and also to leverage existing support plans and relationships for our scholars. And I will say that our seniors have well-defined graduation plans in place. All of our scholars have well-defined graduation plans in place for our school counselors to help support them, and our administrative teams. They continuously closely monitor those plans. And one of the things that I've seen at the high schools that I'm very proud to say is that I've witnessed our schools and their ability to go and make sure that they have positive and build strong positive relationships with our scholars so they can make sure that they're on track to graduate. Next slide, please. And so just a little bit of the background here. Again, according to the state of Wisconsin, the board identifies students who are at risk of not graduating high school on an annual basis, and they develop a plan. And then the administrative code further requires that the district provide written communication to the families and to their students who have been identified as at risk. Next slide, please. Now, this is how they are identified. The term at risk is defined by the state statute, which means students in grades 5 through 12 who are at risk of not graduating from high school because of some of the following reasons. 2 or more of the following reasons. 1 or more years behind in their age group in the number of high school credits attained. 2 or more years behind their age group in basic skill levels. They're identified as habitually truant students, or those students are identified as parents or soon to be parents. Now, as a caveat, I will say that MMSD has a discrepancy on this identification process with parents because we do have support for our scholars who are identified as parents with MMSD to make sure that they are on track to graduate and that they can complete and finish high school with our parenting programs that we offer. The next piece is adjudicated delinquents. And finally, for our 8th grade scholars who score below basic on their state exams or fail to be promoted to 9th grade. Next slide, please. And now I will turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Angie Hicks, to talk about the implementation timeline.
Thank you, Nelson, board members, and everyone in this meeting tonight. The implementation plan, actually it's ongoing, but there's a timeline that goes from July through the end of the year, of the school year. First, what we do is we run student reports of who meet the criteria based upon the state identification. And then we do outreach calls. Then we come back in August and September, we also monitor that report and identify any newly enrolled students. There's a point of contact per school that's identified, and then we do some more outreach. We mail those notification letters to families that they have been, their scholars have been identified, continue the outreach, and we identify any gaps in the existing support plan, and we prioritize these students for planning meetings. We connect with students and families, do student support plan meetings, and then have document plans for them. And then we continue to work through the implementation plan, providing interventions and supports as necessary and needed for each scholar, monitor and refine those plans, and then continue to document, and then summer supports and transition planning as well. If you can see the theme, it's continual contact, communication, support, so we're working with them throughout the entire process and not leaving anyone along the way. Next slide, please. So the implementation outcomes over the last years, as you can see, the initial contacts that we have made in 17, 18 have gone up. However, within the last few years, when COVID hit, the numbers have gone backwards. And so the goal is to continue to move forward and work with scholars and families to ensure that they graduate on time and are on track. Next slide, please. So we began looking at scholars in 5th grade for rising 6th grade identification. And if we look again over time, those numbers have dropped, but as 2021 came, again, they're rising, going back up. The biggest thing that we recognize, though, is that the overall number of students who have come off the list. If you can see, in 12th grade, there were 173 scholars on the list. Now it's dropped. 127 have come off the list, and that is due to our support systems and our internal plans and ways in which we support scholars. Okay. Next slide, please. After our after-action review and school input and feedback have let us know that we have strengths in some scholars, the schools implementing with 100% fidelity across all phases of the plan. No revisions of the plans have been requested. Some schools have well-defined systems and structures, which we plan to help to use more district-wide so that we can learn from one another. And then also recognition of need for improvement and importance of monitoring, that we need to ensure that we continue to stay on top of it. That's one of our strengths. Some barriers this year have been, it's been a difficult school year, and school having some specific hardships. I'm one to say I'm beyond hearing about COVID now. It's here. We need to learn how to thrive through it and live through it, and make sure that we are ensuring that our scholars are obtaining and meeting their goals. Another barrier this year has been staff turnover. Our student mental health needs have been prioritized first. integrating with other work of the school and more proactive interventions at earlier grades. While these might have been barriers, I think that, you know, when we're trying to prioritize student mental health needs, I would say that's actually a strength, because in order for us to get them to where they need to be, we also have to address that. And then, you know, talking about the language of at risk, some ideas that we have been fleshing around or putting out there are ensuring that all students graduate plan, or on track to graduation plan, or supporting all students to ensure a path to graduation, progress monitoring for additional assistance, or personalized graduation plan. At risk, again, has a negative connotation because we're all at risk for something, right? Next slide, please. And then our next steps, we will be incorporating school level feedback and board input into the plan, making connections between the academic plan, the existing school level structures, and continuous improvement. So reflecting and adjusting, looking at what we're doing, how it's working, providing feedback on that, and then making adjustments as needed. And then finally, our annual approval plan at the July board meeting.
So before we open it up for discussion, I just wanted to name a few more things on top of what Dr. Hicks has mentioned and Mr. Render. Both of them identified that we have a plan in place to not only support kind of what we are required to by DPI, but really trying to think about how this becomes more integrated into the fabric of the way we do school as continuous improvement. I think the other important thing to note is while DPI has certain criteria that may identify a student from their language at risk, we have many internal paths to graduation that from our end do not have those students at risk, but actually have those students on a choice in how they want to experience school and how they want to graduate and earn a diploma. So there is definitely some differences there, and that shows in the numbers in terms of how we're able to not only have students come off of that list, but also more students that may be defined from DPI standpoint on our end will graduate and walk across one of those stages in June. So I think that's important to note as well. But with that, either Maya or Savion, I think I will turn it back to you to see if there's any discussion for the board. Again, an opportunity for us to take your input before we adjust the plan that will come back to you in July.
Got it. Thank you so much, Cindy. And so board member questions. I see Board Chair Muldrow with her hand up, and then anyone else, Board Member Gomer-Schmidt. Member Nichols, yeah.
Cindy, I want to ask two questions really specific to graduation. So the first question would be, how many of our students are graduating via IEP? And if that number is specifically, it's really, really small, then I would ask for a percentage versus a number.
Yeah, I will see Nancy Molfenter is on her. I don't know if we have that exact number tonight, but we can definitely get that to you. But I will turn it to Nancy to see if she knows that number offhand, Board Chair.
Yeah, our most recent numbers from last year had that number at approximately 5% of our scholars with an IEP graduating specifically via portfolio. I can certainly get the percent. I would guess it would be about the same for this year, but I can certainly get that to the board within the next couple of days.
My second question specific to graduation might be something you can answer as well, Nancy, but I'm going to ask both you and Cindy. What percentage of our students are graduating beyond the age of 18? So what percentage of our students are graduating at 19, 20, 21, are staying in school for an extended period of time because they need that additional support?
So I can start that. I don't have a specific number. We can get that for you, but I can start that and I can turn it over to Nancy. I think that number has been fluid, but that number seems to have grown a little with the design of Capital High, that is graduation via portfolio also, where some students may take an extra year, as well as some of our GED programs and HSED programs that allow students a fifth year or beyond to graduate. So I have seen that number fluctuate, but I've also seen students taking an opportunity to use that extra time where they needed to earn that diploma. I'll turn it to Nancy, and if we need to get you more details on that, we can do an enrollment poll for you.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question and for getting that answer started, Cindy. So we have, like all school districts, we have a percent of scholars who remain enrolled beyond 12th grade for the purpose of receiving the transition services that they need and that we are required by law to provide. Those tend to be approximately 1 to 2% of our scholars with an IEP who are identified as having higher support needs. So they go to very specific transition to employment programs or our Campus Connect program at Madison College, or our Project Search program at the hospitals. And so I think that the percent is less than 5% of our scholars with an IEP who don't graduate in 4 years with their ninth grade class. But some of those scholars are really remaining for very robust transition programs that we are required under IDEA to provide. So I just wanted to, when you look at our numbers, those scholars are also included, and really the fact that they remain enrolled beyond 12th grade is a very positive thing for their lives.
Yeah, so I really want to tease out those two groups of students before we talk about our students who do not graduate. I think, saying a student's going to graduate via IEP or a student's going to receive services beyond 12th grade is very different than saying these are the students who have been pushed out of our school and pushed out of alternative programs and are, navigating their adult life without a high school education. So what percentage of our students at this time are in that bucket?
Somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3%, but we can get you an exact figure.
2 to 3%, and I would say that would be a few hundred kids.
No, it's for our scholars with an IEP, we have approximately 4,000 in the district, so it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 80 annually who are returning because they haven't finished requirements for high school graduation or didn't finish and don't return to us.
And Ali, I would add that we have a partnership with Operation Fresh Start, just as a reminder for the group. And that partnership every year gets our list of our students that did not graduate and have left MMSD, not the ones that are kind of re-enrolling as a fifth year or beyond. And they work directly with many of our students in a re-engagement process. So that group of students and that percentage, I do not know offhand, but that is a very strong partnership in the way we focus on re-engagement in our community.
So I really appreciate you speaking to that, Cindy Green, because I think that leads into my overarching question, which is, I know that our Operation Fresh Start contract is for about 10 students a semester. And are we more than that? What are we at?
We have about 40 students, and that's students that are under the age of 18. And then there's another whole opportunity for students that I just talked about in terms of re-engagement. Definitely way more than 40. I mean 10, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking about Omega.
Yeah, you're thinking about the HSED. Yep.
And I'm like, and so I guess my real question is, we put all the different ways that our students can access the diploma beyond our schools, our students who have really struggled within our schools. Is there a growing need for alternative ways to graduate? And did the did the pandemic increase the number of students who may be graduating via IEP or graduating with an HSED or a GED versus graduating from their neighborhood school?
Yeah, so I will, I'll start that answer and then I can turn it over to Nancy specific for students with an IEP. I think that it's always an interesting question in terms of number of seats versus types of programs, which I think is always something we are exploring. Do we have the right programs that match students' needs versus do we have an open seat available? So that is definitely something our Office of Youth Re-Engagement has been really digging into and thinking about when actually talking to our students to understand what they desire. It's been really helpful in redesigning our programming. But specific to the pandemic, if you will recall, we added an additional credit recovery teacher at each one of our comprehensive high schools and then a 0.5 at Shabazz to do exactly what you just mentioned, Ali, in terms of thinking about how do we proactively get in front of our students with additional resources and supports over the next few years in order to provide that intensive support so that we don't have more students not graduating. So that is definitely one of the things we've done. In addition to that, we also put additional resources in our Office of Youth Re-Engagement to think about programming that may happen off-site versus within our high schools as well, to be able to support more student programming and more student needs over the next few years. I'll let Nancy, if there's anything she would like to add specific with our students with IEPs.
Sure, and I just to piggyback on what you just shared, the other opportunity that I know a number of our scholars take advantage of is night school opportunities. So that's something else that I've seen be tremendously successful for scholars with and without an IEP. And then one resource that I haven't heard mentioned yet, just to make sure you're all aware of, I know we have a couple of new board members, is we have a program called Foundations. And that is a program, the staff at Foundations work very, very hard to identify scholars who don't graduate after their 12th grade year, scholars with an IEP, and offer them the opportunity to come back. That program operates out of the Urban League. So it's a community partnership we have with the Urban League, and it's a paired academic and employment program. So scholars work and they have a career goal and they work on academics at the same time. And so that's a really fantastic program as well. That is another opportunity to bring students back into the fold and support them to finish their high school diploma.
So my follow-up question and last question is, Cindy, when you talked about kind of the people that we placed at schools to get ahead of, folks being credit deficient and make sure folks were on track to graduate, I think the question is, has that strategy been effective?
So that additional staff goes into place next year. And so we will see. In terms of what we have at our comprehensives now is we have one dedicated staff person for credit recovery right now. And while it has been successful, we have seen over the last 2 years the need for additional staff to create more spaces for students to do that short-term credit recovery so that we get them back on track quicker. But we'll see kind of the progress as our schools begin to staff for those additional positions going into the fall of this upcoming school year.
All right, thank you, Chris, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt, followed by Board Member Nichols, followed by Board Member Symptom.
Thank you. And I just want to say thanks again for bringing this plan to the board for discussion and feedback prior to the district updating the plan in July. I think this is great to be able to have this conversation and really take a look at this important work that we're doing. I think one thing that's always puzzled me about this, so basically this plan work is statutorily defined for the board under PI 25. So we as a school board are required to create these plans, and there's a whole bunch of statutory requirements around this. I think one thing that I've always wondered about is we're very focused on making the list and then providing that written communication to parents and making sure we have a plan for the students. But then from October to the end of the year, you know, somehow the plan gets put into place. And, you know, the statutory requirements really talk about it as a program. And I understand that it's not like a program that everybody accesses, right? It's a lot of different supports and MTSS and a lot of different things that help students get back on track. But I guess the piece that I'm missing is how do we get a handle of what services the students are receiving and if it's actually working for the students? That's the part that I want to see in plans going forward, because it, you know, the statutes require us to do that. And one of the requirements is also how the district will evaluate the success of services provided under the plan. So that also kind of gets to Ali's point is how are we measuring what we're providing to students and if it's working? And so I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, because for so long we have really been focused on identifying the students and writing the plan.
Yeah, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt, I can start that conversation, and I welcome others, Dr. Molfenter, Dr. Esser from Student and Staff Supports if they are here. I think what you just articulated is part of our plan, right? The letter, the communication, but the actual student-facing implementation plan is what happens beyond that, that supports students either coming off of that at-risk plan or supports students with getting to graduation and receiving a diploma. It does look different based on the student, based on the grade level, and based on the school, which is why in our overall plan, we provide more of a high-level list of the types of interventions that may happen, as well as the different programs or options to graduation based on the grade level that that a student has an option towards. If the kind of conversation of what you're alluding to is to better understand the student level implementation plan after the letter is received, after the school writes it, is that what you're looking for in terms of how the student does, or how we might have more of a comprehensive singular program for students? Maybe you could clarify that so I could.
Yeah,
continue.
no, I'm not looking for a singular program, because we know there's a lot of different things that students need, right, to get them back on track and meet their needs. No, I guess what I'm asking is that very specific question that has to go in our plan is how the district will evaluate the success of the services provided under the plan. So I guess I really need to see how we are planning to do that going forward. And I guess one place to start is maybe providing the board with the current at-risk plan that we have, that we're planning to submit, and any like draft adjustments that we have to it, you know, going forward.
Absolutely. I think we've done that in the past and we've provided track changes, but what I can do is make sure we go back and we have a further conversation with all of you before you get the final written plan for more input. There is the current plan is on our website, and the current plan is outlined for the board. But if that is kind of where you're at, happy to kind of look at what we currently state as our evaluation of it and think about that. We do not have the plan for July written yet, because this conversation was critically important to that, as well as the input we received from our schools. You saw kind of a glimpse of some of the themes from our schools, but we definitely do not have the next iteration written yet to share. So that is something that we will be providing to you going forward. And just to foreshadow, when Board Member Pearson, myself, and Dr. Jenkins had this conversation, we said that it might be important to come back again in June for this group to continue to provide updates and input before that July plan. So I'm hearing that that might be a great direction for us to go.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I do value it, this being a conversation between the board and administration over this important work. Just a couple more questions. How has COVID affected our ability to identify students needing more support to stay on track? I know that, you know, just in general, we weren't able to test students. There were barriers to really evaluating how students were doing. How has that changed this year? What else have you been seeing in regard to that?
Yeah, I will start and I will turn it over to Dr. Hicks and Mr. Render, just based on their closeness to the schools. I think you did see from the data that Dr. Hicks presented that we had a gap in certain grade levels because we didn't have test scores. I think in addition to that, as we've all seen, student mental health needs have risen, and we have had more mental health needs than before. And I think that in turn has potentially had more students identified as at risk and or on path to maybe need more supports for graduation success. And I think we've seen that across the board. I think we've also seen from our staff, due to some staffing shortages, that people just trying to realign and to support students while also supporting some of our staffing shortages has been a part of that as well. But I'll turn it over to my colleagues to see if they want to add anything to that.
All right, I'll just add a few things. And again, I want to say to the board members and everyone's asking questions, thank you for those robust questions. And the conversation is very, very engaging. I'll just say some of the things that I've seen, again, at the school level, is our teachers and our staff paying close attention to the students, because they have a lot of those needs that Cindy just mentioned with mental health. And so they've dug into making sure that we have SEL moments, awareness moments for our scholars, specific interventions in place so they can make sure that they are meeting the needs. Specifically, we had a meeting with our high school principals and our counselors where we talked about some of the metrics that's in place to make sure that we measure where our students are right now to make sure that they're on track, using the credit attainment system that we have in place to make sure that they're on track to graduate. And so those counselors have been doing an excellent job of monitoring that and providing updates to their administration, and the administrators have been providing updates to our office as well. So again, it's just a big collaboration where our team is working extremely well and also receiving feedback on how we can continue to improve. I'll let Angie speak if she has anything else to say.
I would just like to reiterate some of the things that Cindy talked about. One of the biggest challenges that I have seen really is staffing, and staff having to cover classes who are from student services or whatever, and having to be in places and spaces to ensure that we keep schools open, but also the fact that, when we think about our current 8th graders, they were last in school in person in 6th grade. And so the level of social, emotional, mental health work that needs to take place in order to reintegrate them and get them back and build the stamina and all those things of being in schools, and then try to accelerate processes and learning at the same time. So when we talk about things that have impacted scholars, all of those things. And it is my hope and our hope, and with our planning and intentionality, humanity, excellence, and equity, that we will be pushing in to leverage all of what scholars need and afford momentum with giving staff and scholars the supports that they need.
First of all, thank you both, Mr. Render and Dr. Hicks, and also Mrs. Green. I just want to remind all of us, Dr. Hicks pretty much summarized in terms of some of the effects of the pandemic. And I just want to say to us the impact of the whole virtual learning and what it has had on our students and our staff in our community and the whole world. And so we're still recovering from this whole piece of having been in isolation, and how we're trying to re-engage our students. That's not going to be done overnight. And I ask everyone to be very patient with trying to rush and start back assessing in the way that we did prior to the pandemic, expecting those same level of results without any different actions. And so the intentionality that we're going to have to go through to re-engage, to lean forward, to bring our students along, but it's bringing our staff along. It's bringing parents along. It's bringing our entire community. It's going to happen, but let's be reminded that there is a reality that we're not even out of the pandemic yet, but we are beginning to lean forward together and understand more of what we can do now than what we could do. So the plan that was being presented in terms of the at-risk plans and some of the earlier questions by Chair Muldrow, quite frankly, we're having to shift a little bit more even with some of our regular students because of what they've experienced to help them begin to re-engage at high levels. And so I think the social emotional mental health piece, we're going to be in this for several years to come in terms of trying to just stabilize ourselves as human beings. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And I agree. I also think that we've also talked about when we talk about early literacy and beyond, in that when students build those academic skills, that really helps them stay engaged. And so we need to find a way to move forward on that, even in the midst of the pandemic, so that we're helping more students, be engaged in their learning. And I appreciated Dr. Hicks saying that too. Ready to move on, right, from the pandemic and figure out a way to help our students move forward. I'm just going to throw out two things. You do not have to answer these, but for our further discussion going forward, I'd like us to take a look at how credit attainment fits in with those academic skills that students have, to make sure that we're not just having students gain credit without actually gaining the skills that they need to for their next steps, whatever they do post-secondary. And then the other thing, PI 25 also allows us to look earlier. So not just students that are not on track to graduate grades 5 to 12, but also looking, pre-K to 4. And I think that would fit in really well with the early literacy work that we're doing, to really get us to proactively approach this and help more students reach those levels before we're hitting middle school, right?
Thank this board for the vision and the adoption of moving to full 4K 4-day programs and looking at the letters, looking at science reading, early literacy, because that was the whole intent in trying to anticipate, starting really early. It's going to take us time, but we know if we get those skill sets correct, it's going to have a direct correlation on everything, social, emotional, mental health, skills attainment, all of that. So thanks to the board for what you all did in terms of having insight.
And I'll just add to that also the moratorium on 4K through 5 suspensions. All right, Board Member Nichols.
All right, thanks. On slide 13, I'm just curious about the implementation outcomes and wondering if you can just speak to what might be some of the reasons why in the initial contact, and I'm assuming kind of like the first letter sent, we're below maybe 100%. What I think I might know some of the factors, but I'd be curious to hear from your experience kind of why in that initial phase we may not make as much contact with the students as as I would think we would need to. That's one. And then on the next slide, when we look at the total number of students, thank you for providing the data that in the 18-19 school year, it says 1,222 total. And then there's a big drop in the 19-20 school year, and it's back up a little bit in this current school year. So forgive me if I'm not getting it, but I would have thought in the 19-20 school year, because of the pandemic, the numbers would have gone up. So I'm just curious about how the numbers kind of dropped significantly and now are back up. And can you brag for a little bit on what you all have done that has led to getting so many students off the list? I think that's worth talking about.
Yeah, so thank you, Board Member Nichols. I'll start with your last one. I can't brag without recognizing all of our staff, right? I mean, it is not me per se, it is not us on the call per se, it is our staff at our schools that are working real tirelessly to create plans and make direct contact with every student. And I think that's exactly it. I think we, over the last few years, have started to learn more about the importance of what it takes to support every one of our scholars. And that means relationships. That means figuring out what it is that that individual student needs. That means accessing all of the resources that we have available in this community, right? A really resource-rich community. And I think we're doing a better job of being able to connect students to resource and being able to know what is in front of them for that. So I think that is one of the main reasons. And I think that as we have learned about what works well for our students, we're getting better at how to support them along the way, right? We've been doing this plan, if you will, or this work pretty consistently for a few years. So I would say in general, umbrella, that is what it is, but it is definitely our staff working individually with our students and also connecting with their family. I know I'll just give one example for our students that are either identified and may be youth in one of our metro divisions or youth that are attending one of our options to graduation programs or alternative programs. We have shifted the way we approach this work with them. We've shifted the language we're using in those conversations with the young person and their families, and have really shifted how we are not just thinking about them as an individual for their support, but thinking about the family support as well, what the family might need in terms of getting connected to a job or what resources they may need. So we've been trying to definitely take a more holistic approach as well as a connection to family. So that is an example of that. Before I answer your other questions, I will just pause to see if any of my colleagues want to add to that.
Cindy, I just think you hit it on the head when it comes down to making sure that we recognize our staff for doing the work that they do, because it is so important that we share the stories that we're sharing about what they are doing at the school level and the intentionality that they're taking on to make sure that our children and our families are connected, to make sure they keep their focus on attaining the credit and also graduating. So again, I just want to say thanks for lifting that. And I've seen several things at different schools. And again, I want to just shout out just one of them because I have so many, but I just want to say to all of the schools that I've visited, the staff and also the leadership teams have been very instrumental in making sure that the programs are monitored and that they are actually touching the lives of those two students and also those families.
In terms of your second question, the numbers going down for the year of COVID. I think there's a few things. I think that some of the criteria that is identified by DPI was hard to measure and hard to track during COVID when we were virtual. I think the way students attained credit during COVID was different. If you remember, we moved to a pass, no pass. Attendance was different during COVID as well, which is one of those criteria. And assessments were waived for most of that time. So those, I think in combination, are one of the reasons why our numbers decreased. I think we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick based on shifting in all of those things I just named again. And your first question, I forgot already.
Okay. It was related to the
the plans. Yep.
Yeah, like the initial contact, the letter sent. I'm curious, and it's not a judgment. I'm just curious why that percentage isn't closer to 98% or 99% of the students were initially contacted versus the percentages we see. What might be some of the factors that would contribute to that?
Yeah, I could say a few things. One, the list from DPI and cross-referencing of every student that is still in our district enrolled and physically attending sometimes varies. So I think that is one piece. I think the second piece, when we think about contact versus letter sent varies. When we define contact, we mean that you physically have spoken to a parent or a guardian versus letter sent, meaning you put that letter in the mail or you hand that letter and it goes home. So I think that is definitely a discrepancy. And then I would say for this year, the only other thing that I can personally name, and again, I'll open it up for others without making assumptions, is our schools have been challenged with staffing in general. And so this component of the work did not get completed as quickly as possible as we have in the past. We have actually had to use a lot of our central office staff to help with the letter generation, to help with some of the phone calls, to help with some of that support this year in particular, because of just kind of the world we are in right now. So that is also a reason for some of that.
Great, thank you for the context. I'll just finish by saying that when I look at the indicators for who we consider perhaps challenged to be on track for graduation, those are no small characteristics of and challenges that our students are facing, and it takes a lot of hard work to re-engage students and to help them imagine that there is a pathway for them to be on track and that we care. So again, kudos to all of the staff who have been working really hard on making sure that our students find that pathway and see themselves as being an engaged learner and having a pathway through our district. The one thing that I will say is, I hope that our plan, and I have not reviewed it yet, so thank you for letting me know it's on the website. I will do my part. But I hope that in part of our plan and in part of our narrative and our story about what we've been learning over the last couple of years, we're really articulate about what we saw through the pandemic, the recovery back, the hard work that it is taking to really re-engage our students, to help them recover, and what things seem to be working. And I would not want anyone in the public to come away with an impression that the significant drop in numbers, okay, is some kind of act of the district to make their numbers look better. Do you see what I'm saying? Because I feel like sometimes when all of a sudden graduation rates go up or the children who are identified as at risk drop significantly, there are folks in the public who are like, oh, they're like fixing the numbers. They've done something to make the district look better. And so what I'm hearing tonight, which is why I asked the questions I asked, is that you all are putting in the work and you're actually getting, it sounds like better at actually knowing how to relate with young people and getting them re-engaged. And so I hope that part of our plan highlights that so that it does not just look like we're trying to reduce the numbers to make ourselves look better. But anyway, thank you for your, thanks for answering my questions.
All right, thank you. Board Member Simpkin, followed by Board Member Vandermolen. And then I'm gonna add myself to the queue.
Thank you. I want to continue on the track that Michelle was on. One of the pieces that jumped out at me was the line that says that part of the work is to develop a plan to address the reasons a student is at risk. And then in the list of barriers for this year, it didn't talk about basic needs. And so what that makes me think of is that's a reoccurring reason rather than something that is particular to this year. I would really like to see in this report a way that you parse out how many students that are at risk are receiving resources from community organizations or partnerships that we have related to meeting their basic needs, or resources from our school district. And in basic needs, I'm thinking about things like food, shelter, those types of basic needs, but also safety supports, maybe parenting education, mental health supports, those types of different resources that we may be hooking students up with in order, or families up with, in order to help the students be ready to be able to focus on academics. And so I just like to see that, that as a piece of the types of interventions that the school district is using. That's it.
Thank you. Board Member
Yep.
Banner.
Absolutely. I just want to say that the one thing that could help make these plans easier for me to know if they're working or not is possibly a rubric on what we're looking for to define success. What we consider actually what we are expecting the students to do. Because I'm not an educator. I don't necessarily have a basis of what skills are due at what ages. And it would be really kind of helpful if possible. I hope wouldn't overwhelm anyone, but that would really be kind of helpful to know what exactly we're looking for, so I know how to see if it's working.
Thank you for that, Nikki.
Got it. Thank you. And my last comment suggestion in terms of what we put in the last plan is that, Cindy, I appreciate it when you started this conversation saying that we reject the underlying philosophy of a quote unquote at-risk plan. I think that language is deficit based, that somehow these students are somehow deficient in skills or something or the other, and that it also inverts the responsibility on the system, and the system essentially saying that they have discriminated against certain groups of students, especially our Black and Brown students and students with disabilities, and our students experiencing poverty, and our students who are LGBTQ plus. And so I guess in the plan, or how we evaluate success, I'd like to see how we are decreasing our school discipline rates, and how we are increasing engagement and feelings of belongingness with students in our schools, and how we are holding our staff to high standards in how they interact with students and our students' families.
Thank you for that, Savion.
Thank you, Board Member Castro. I would also like to remind us of how we started this presentation with Zamaria Wallace. And as we're going through, and it's easy to look at a plan, I'm glad that you highlighted that, and someone else may call it at risk, but will that define us? And I think we reject that whole notion of at risk. And when you look at Zamaria Wallace, how will he turn out a few years from now? Will he be proficient? Or is that the only thing we're looking for? Will he still be this young person who's showing leadership skills, great qualities like we highlighted tonight? Or will his system tear him down and he'll begin to, before you even get to middle school, drop out of school? So I ask, as we go do this, we make sure that he becomes a great reader, that he becomes the full child that he could become, that he participates in more, and knowing that math is good, but so is art, so is doing service. So as a system, as we're trying to become a liberated district, we're fighting some of the same racist ideology that's been placed upon our students that's hurt so many before the pandemic. I want to continue to remind us, before the pandemic, we had a number of students who, by state's definition, being behind 2 years, who were listed by their definition as at risk. We have made a critical investment in early literacy and beyond. We can break this cycle. And I'm looking so forward to working with this group of staff, these students in this community, because we will be the one to become a liberated district as we reject all these other notions that's been placed upon us. Maria Wallace.
Savion, are we ready to?
Yep, that's it.
All right. Well, speaking of that, let's get to the arts. Thank you for that, Dr. Jenkins. We have two more updates under our academic plan. If Jesse and or Barb, you could share this screen again, I would greatly appreciate it. You could go to the next slide, please. I am going to turn this over to Miss Kaylee Jackson and Mr. Peter Kuzma, who are going to give us an update on our first ever. I just want to kind of get the energy going. Stay with us for two more topics, but the first ever Summer Arts Academy that we are really thrilled to talk about. And we want to provide some updates based on input we got from the board the last time we came and where we are today. So I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee and Peter.
Thank you so much, Ms. Green, and thank you, board. I'm really excited to share these updates with you. Before we get started, I want you all just to channel your inner Zamarian Wallace. Channel your inner 12-year-old, channel your inner creativity, your inner artist, whether you wanted to be a singer or you were interested in being in a play or the behind the scenes work or music production. We are so excited to be here tonight to share with you our updates and all of the work that's been happening in this co-creation of our Summer Arts Academy. It's been spoken tonight that we are really working towards being a liberated district. And part of being a liberated district means creating opportunities for students to really see themselves and to express themselves in ways that they may not have before. And we know that when we do that, we are creating more opportunities and better opportunities to impact our students' overall achievement and also wellness. So Peter, please take us away.
Thank you so much, Kaylee, and thank you, board, for the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about this and answer any questions that you have. It's going to be a pretty brief update, but I do want to give you a little bit of framing in terms of the program reach as it currently stands, what our enrollment and our process looks like, what our programming process looks like in the programs that we are currently have developed and are working towards making sure they're ready to fly, and as well as communication efforts that we've made to make sure that more students have the opportunity as we move forward. So I'll just let you know that as of this morning, we have just at the middle school and high school levels, we have about 220 registration entries across all three of our differently translated registration forms. And the total spots available for middle school and high school, if every single option were fully enrolled, is in the 600 student range, which is pretty high. And we're not anticipating having full enrollment, but we know that we are still really pushing for making sure that every student realizes that this opportunity exists. So we'll talk a little bit more about our student outreach later. Our current demographics, roughly half of the students as of our demographics on the 4th, about 5 days ago, about half of our students are students of color, and about half of our students, about 51.6% actually, identify via Infinite Campus as white. But we are continuing to reach out to make sure that we can broaden opportunity and make sure that our student enrollment can reflect the student population that we're really targeting, which are kids who we need to re-engage. We really want to make sure that they recognize that there's a place for them and ways in which they can engage in creative problem solving, creativity, and self-expression with their interests. Where you can go ahead and, I was going to say the intentional outreach strategies that we have for students. We actually have, our communications team has retooled our wording. We've so far been primarily depending upon outreach that has been a bigger broadcast method. So we've had a lot of parent interest and a lot of community interest, making sure that students are getting enrolled. We're reaching out as well now directly to students. We have some social media posts, some individual teacher contact and staff contact through our schools to kind of tap kids on the shoulder and say, hey, you know, the personal invitation we realize is important, and being able to tell students, hey, we think that this opportunity might be just the thing for you, that can make a huge difference. A lot of times the opportunity to take on something like this is something that some students might think they can't do or doesn't apply to them because they've never had the opportunity before. One of our biggest goals has been to remove barriers. So we've removed the barriers of cost to participate. We've removed barriers of food. We've removed barriers of transportation. And now we're seeking to remove the barrier of kids recognizing their own opportunity. And that sometimes can be a little bit challenging too. So between personal teacher invitations, we've also reached out through community centers, faith-based institutions, on social media, MMSD website, and also newsletters. Right now, our staffing progress to date, I'll give a little bit more of a detailed information about this. If on the next slide, if you could go ahead and advance that, please. All of the programs that we have currently available for students to see and to register for, all of these opportunities are actually based in community partners and teaching artists who we have reached out, or they've reached out to us to let us know that these are things that they're able to offer and that they're able to bring to students, and we're really excited for that. We have lots of MMSD students who are interested. We have MMSD staff who are also expressing interest, and we're moving towards growing our MMSD staff. As with a lot of other programs, staffing has been sort of a challenge that we're trying to get in front of as best we can, and we're continuing to work on that. But all of these opportunities, all of these programs on deck are currently either contracts that are pending approval or contracts that we are finalizing our quotation process, or contracts that we're simply being able to make sure that all of the pieces are in place in order to push them through. You will notice that we have made a concerted effort to ensure that we are able to focus on Black and Brown artists and experiences. All of the asterisked opportunities that are listed there are actually organizations or individuals that identify as Black or Brown or people of color as well. So that's sort of a broad overview. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has about our process progress so far.
All right, Board Member Pearson.
I'm going to try this again. I just wanted to say thank you to the whole team. I know that we have been working on this for actually since last year, of just identifying ways in which that we can bring a different ambiance of arts in Madison and grow it and really focus on Black and Brown artists and experiences. I know as an artist myself here in Madison, you know, Black and Brown artists is, and that's not just fine artists, like any kind of art, right? Aren't always given the platform to be able to have the full experience that Madison offers. And so highlighting this in our schools and be really reflective of the different experiences our children have, I think it's just beautiful in a sense of just allowing them to bask in the things of their own culture and to see themselves. So I just want to just say kudos to this. I'm so excited for this. And it's been a long time coming. And as a kid growing up in Madison, I mean, the only thing I was probably a part of was like African American Academy, but that's a whole nother conversation where we learned a lot of different like African art and focusing on, you know, just Black, you know, Black Indigenous art as well. So I just want to say thank you, kudos. I'm excited to see this, and I'm looking forward to updates in the future with actual performances, hopefully, that we can bring in. And yes, that's all I wanted to say. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Board Member Nichols.
Like Board Member Pearson, I'm super excited about the Summer Arts Academy. Thank you all for the vision and just the variety of arts that are available. Peter, here's a couple of follow-up questions. It sounds like you're hoping to get more students registered. You're working hard on the outreach. Do you have an ideal number that you're hoping for? And when does registration close, or is there a soft closing date?
So great questions. Thank you for those. Absolutely, Board Member Nichols. What I can tell you is that our outreach strategies for students and families who haven't previously been engaged, we're are ongoing. I think our target goal, I think a realistic goal would be to get between half and possibly 2/3 of the total potential enrollment numbers for our middle school and high school groups. That would be a dream. That would be our goal. At the moment, if we can work towards our halfway mark, I think that would be pretty solid. For this, our pilot year, one of the challenges that we're facing is that we started from the beginning recognizing that there was only so much we could try to accomplish and try to encompass, and we are able to reach the 1,000 kids who are in the MSCR SREC aftercare programs at each of the elementary sites, and those are happening through push-in residency model programming. We're also seeking to reach out. Janet Dyer has been extremely helpful in problem solving and thinking through possibilities. We're also reaching out through neighborhood community centers, and I am also seeking an option for some virtual programming that we might be able to additionally make available to students who are not in the SREC aftercare programs. That being said, our real focus, and something that I recognize as a parent, something that I've recognized as a teacher for years, is that there tends to be a lot more programming opportunities for kids to engage in things at the elementary level. And then suddenly once middle school hits, like things just kind of dry up, things fall off the map. And so one of our big areas for our push has been at the middle school and at the high school level. We are, of course, now fighting expectations of the families and the students in the middle schools. And so that's sort of a challenge there. We have extended our registration. Our extended registration goes to the end of this week. However, we do have an additional week where we are offering late registration. As long as we can possibly say yes to a student who wants to participate, we will definitely find a way to do that. So we are encouraging people to register as soon as possible, because that is going to, of course, make a big difference as to whether we see a course that we have planned as being viable. We can't obviously finish a contract with a teaching artist or a teacher if we know that we don't have students that are going to make the opportunity really economically viable as well. So yeah, we have sort of we have an extended registration followed by a soft registration, and we are kind of pushing on all fronts right now. And I apologize, was there another question you asked?
You must have heard it in my mind. My follow-up is, if you're a 6th through 12th grade student who is recommended for summer school or taking summer schoal, even at the high school level, are you able to access any of the Summer Arts Academy? Or are they kind of offered at the same time?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because I absolutely wanted to make sure that kids who were enrolled and engaged in summer school had every opportunity. And so actually what we've done is all of our middle school and high school offerings are taking place in the afternoons. recognizing that, and actually this was something that was framed by somebody who I was working with and trying to problem solve different ways of ensuring that we had, for example, sites and rooms and programming availability. Was they mentioned that a whole lot of the kids who are recommended for middle school and high school summer school, they're not there because they can't understand the content. It's because so many other aspects of their lives got in the way. And we want to make sure, again, that this is a way to remove barriers. We do not want to have concurrent programming that's going to prevent kids from participating. So we're actually making sure that our transportation frame allows for kids who are coming out of their summer school sites after the summer school programming, that they will have a chance to grab a meal and hop a bus and get to one of our arts hub sites so that they can participate fully. All of our programming is scheduled for the afternoons. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Board Member Gomer-Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick comment. I really appreciate you clarifying that. And I think it's great to do that middle school, high school programming in the afternoons. One thing when I was sort of going through, I think you guys sent the link to the board maybe about the option to enroll, and I was taking a look through it. I'm just wondering if it might help to also clarify that you can do this and this, or yeah. I wasn't quite sure. It looked like there were two options to choose, and it was a little confusing to tell. Do I choose just the 1 to 2:30? Do I choose do you know what I mean? There were some that were the full 2 hours. There were some that were split up. And yeah. If there's a way to just make that easier for people to understand if they just choose one or if they choose two or if they're there the whole time. Because I think there's an open art studio too, which might be really intriguing to some students. So I think whatever you can do to clarify what the options are and how the students would be spending their time would make it even more attractive for students and their families.
Thank you, Board Member Gomes-Schmidt. That actually is something that we have taken on as one of our new communications pushes. Actually, as of this week, we streamlined, simplified, and clarified our registration forms. And so as families or students are going through the registration form, we've developed graphics. We have different ways for people to see, oh, I'm choosing session 1 or session 2, or these following options will take me the whole afternoon. So we're trying to not only clarify that option, but we've also established a process by which we're going to be reaching back to any students or families where there might be a scheduling conflict so that we can actually say, hey, this isn't going to work, but here are your options and let's work through this. We're going to need to kind of work through this almost like a registrar situation. I also wanted to mention that we have specifically targeted actually for communication the students who are confirmed as having been enrolled in summer semester at the middle school and high school levels. We're reaching out to them directly as well, just to say, hey, you've got the afternoon to try other new things and to engage in the arts and other opportunities if you want to. Just letting them know kind of how that will work so that they have that ready to roll if they want it.
That's great. Thank you. Because there's so many exciting opportunities just looking through the list and all those options. I'm really excited about it. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Moving forward.
So you've got me.
Jenkins.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to thank you all for this work and specifically emphasize the opportunities Peter spoke to at the elementary school level in terms of how MSCR will kind of connect our youngest learners with chances to be more creative. I also want to thank you all for really, making sure we understood the intentional effort in terms of including diverse communities. And I just want to ask a little bit about local partnerships in terms of supporting this work. So who all are you working with to do this? And what has that looked like? And if there's folks out there who are going, wait, I don't see like tap dance on there or jazz dance on there, or I've got something I could bring to this, how do they get involved?
That is a great question. I appreciate that. There are several local partners who I was able to engage with right off the bat, and that we are currently working through a variety of options. What I will say is that Arts for All Wisconsin, for example, their whole purpose in extending opportunities to artists and for artists with disabilities, they have a huge array of teaching artists that are available. And so we've been able to organize a proposal with them for, I want to say, 4 different teaching artists just from that organization. UW Arts Collaboratory has a number of different options as well. So we've been trying to make sure that we are connecting with our local artists as much as possible. However, I will also acknowledge Madison is a town where there are so many arts organizations, there are so many artists, that it is well nigh impossible to try and ensure that we've reached out to every single one. And so I kind of keep having to remind myself, and I keep having to try and remind those who I'm working with, that we're viewing this as the strongest possible pilot year that we possibly can. We're making sure that we have a strong enough opportunity and strong enough options for students that if there can be support for this sort of programming in the future, we can continue to grow it. And knowing that local artists will see that it's happening, will have interest in participating because they'll know what we're working towards, that is something definitely that we've got in our vision and in the works. There's also just the fact that over the course of the pandemic, a lot of arts organizations, especially smaller individual arts orgs, they've really lost a lot of capacity. A lot of them had to go find other work. They had to travel to other areas. And so we have been somewhat dependent on finding artists to work with who have maintained the capacity or are parts of slightly larger organizations or are connected in some other way. But I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you so much for speaking to that and for partnering with folks in our community who are doing incredible work and inclusive work and intentional work around the arts. My last question for you all is really specific to how we leverage this to inform the school year. So I've talked about this a lot. One of the areas that we really struggle to serve students in is folks who are advanced learners in the area of performing arts. And because we don't do a lot of dance instruction during the day, that area specifically is an area where we might miss kids who have incredible strengths throughout our district. What are we doing this summer to identify those students and make sure that they're supported in areas in which they have incredible talent throughout the school year?
That is a great question. I appreciate that question. What we are finding is that identifying the students in order to encourage the students to participate, in some cases create sort of that secular challenge of, in order to identify the student, you have to know that this is an area of interest and that this is something that they're good at. There are a couple of students, obviously, who, they can't move down the hall without making it very clear that they are dancers in their very core, right? But ensuring that students know that our dance options exist, that they are being offered, and then ensuring that they are able to find that option. For example, one of the things that we did as we clarified our registration form a little bit further and streamlined things was to be able to put our dance options right at the top of both of our Arts Hub sort of options as you're going through the internal logic of the Google form registration form. We wanted to make sure that even though our dance will likely be handled at an off-site facility and not necessarily at the Arts Hubs, we wanted to make sure that everybody saw that first and that they knew that it was there. So that is an interesting challenge. And I know that Madison has a really broad, really wide-ranging and really long-standing dance community. And that is one area that I wish we had more options to pull from, and that's something I would definitely like to expand on within our school year and within our schools, as well as for the Arts Academy in the future.
Peter, can I just chime in here a little? I want to
Yeah.
just expand that a little further. So one, I just want to remind everybody, and the board, I think you know this, right? This Summer Arts Academy is being funded through ESSER. So it's a great opportunity to utilize one-time funds as we're testing out what should be possible for sustainability moving forward. I think the second, and we're going to talk a little more about this in our next topic, but our academic plan and how we're thinking about our academic plan, what courses we offer and what courses we need to start shifting, I think is part of that conversation based on what student interests are, to think about where some of these arts opportunities that we're seeing students take advantage of this summer will play into our school year. And then I want to just lift the concept that Dr. Jenkins talks about all of the time in terms of schools in the community and community in the schools, and how we start to use this summer opportunity to continue to leverage our arts organizations that exists here in Madison, and where we might be able to think about further partnerships to be able to offer this during the school day for our students. So I think those are just some additional things in terms of what we're going to learn from this, as well as what we're hearing so far in our input from our academic plan as well.
And just to expand on that just a little bit more, thank you, Ms. Green. Alongside Peter throughout all of this planning has been our advanced learning team. So both Dr. Sharon Alexander and Amy Sheridan have every day, hand in hand, every step of the way, been working alongside Peter so that we can, really look at this as a way to expand advanced learning through the arts for our students throughout the district. So know that that is at the very core of this planning as well.
Thank you all so much for speaking to that. I have to say, I do hope that we're looking to UW Madison as a resource, and to Professor Christopher Walker, who is the director of the arts, but is also a dance professor. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us in Madison to align with some really great partners in doing this work. But overwhelmingly, I deeply appreciate the work that you all are doing. And Peter, I heard you say, I hope that we can do this. And I believe firmly that you have a board that will, back you up and build towards having an expansive relationship with the arts for our young people. So thank you for taking these first steps, and I'm excited to be on this journey with you.
Thank you. Board Member Vandermeulen, I see your, sorry.
Hey, honestly, my comments were taken up by Mrs. Green and the team and Chair Muldrow, but I did want to take one opportunity to say thank you to the board again for supporting this, because we did this together, started talking about it. Chair Muldrow from day one talked about arts. I think everybody knows she's talked about arts anytime you see her, right? But the whole board came together along with the team, and I just want to say thank you. This is a big thing for MMSD. And I'm so happy for all of our scholars and our staff. Peter, thanks for your leadership on this, and the entire team. Thank you to everybody.
All right, and Board Member Vandermeulen?
Yes, I just wanted to say to Peter, if you need help reaching out to disabled artists, I have connections in the disability community and in the art community that I would be happy to work with you on that.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Be in touch for sure.
Please.
All right. And moving on.
Okay, if you could share the slides again, Jesse and/or Barb. Okay, as we continue talking about our academic plan, we wanted to provide an update on input that we have had so far, the reach to date, and some of the themes that we are receiving in our input sessions. Important to note that we are still in the input session around this work, but what we are hearing is pretty common across all stakeholder groups, and we wanted to share some of that. In general, we are hearing things that are centered into 4 buckets that we're calling intentional focus areas. This concept of rigorous and engaging learning, justice and belonging, well-being, and capacity building. And regardless of what group we have spoken to and heard from so far, these themes have resonated throughout. We are thinking deeply about how these will align and help us realize our goals. But just a reminder, this is still kind of our input phase. Could you go to the next slide, please, Barb? So we wanted to kind of share what is our reach today. We have heard from a variety of stakeholders across our city, and super excited based on all that people have shared. Some of those are our senior leadership group, central office. We have spoken to all of our principals more than once. We've spoken to a number of teachers and are continuing to work directly with Mike Jones and MTI to think about more universal approaches for all of our staff. When we think about our student groups, we wanted to ensure that we were centering our students that we need their voice the most. And so we started with our students that are identified as justice involved, our 4 divisions of Metro in terms of their experiences with school and what they desire for an academic plan. Many of all our alternative programs that we spoke about a little earlier tonight as well as a bunch of our middle school and high school students. This is our 3rd time that we will have come back to you in terms of just providing an update, and we've done a few community sessions. Could you go to the next slide, please? I'm going to turn this over to Kaylee, and she's going to just provide an update on the themes that we have heard to date.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So we have had the absolute pleasure of really taking the academic plan input show on the road and really hearing from a ton of different stakeholders. What I would like to do and how I'd like to center this update for you all today is really centering some of these themes that we're finding, particularly that our students are bringing to us in the spirit of Zamari and Wallace. So in terms of a rigorous and engaging learning, some of the themes that we're finding our students really in particular speaking to include AVID. Everywhere we go, students are talking about how they love their AVID class, how AVID class is where they are getting the most skills and how they're just really engaged in that experience. We're also hearing from them a desire for more culturally relevant and accurate materials, right? We're hearing a lot around around humanities courses, around social studies courses, and really wanting to be sure that what they are learning is new and fresh to them every year. We're also hearing from our high school students for a desire for ACT prep to be available for all of our high school students. Next slide, please, Jessie. Thank you. In terms of justice and belonging, some of the questions that we are asking of students in particular is, what do you need to be successful? And what do you need from adults in order to be successful? And some of the themes that we're hearing really lie a lot on their desire to build really strong relationships within the buildings, strong relationships with the staff in the buildings. Students are really asking for teachers to get to know them as people, right? Get to know me as a human, and then support me also in building relationships with the other students in the classroom and the other students within the building. They're also really saying that they want to continue to have their cultures honored and seen and reflected throughout the day and throughout our buildings. Next slide, Jessie. And then in terms of well-being, our students, they're talking about food. Okay, so they want some better variety of food and cultural representation and more access to snacks. Don't we all want that? As well as, talking about safety, right? Both physical and that psychological safety, as we know, COVID has had quite an impact on that. We also have a lot of students who are continuing to advocate for accessibility to gender inclusive bathrooms. We're hearing a lot of that as we go to our different schools, as well as updating playground equipment in some of the schools, at some of the schools that we haven't yet been able to do that. And I really wanted to pull this one out as well. And that's that bottom bullet there where it says a focus on adult well-being in order to tend to the scholar well-being. So really making sure that we are a district that is supporting the wellness of our staff and how that impacts the wellness then of our students. Next slide. And then capacity building. This isn't a question that we ask students in particular, but we've got a lot of themes from our school leaders that we're getting from this. And really they're asking first and foremost for protected professional development time. Right? They want the time to meet with their staff, the time to develop their staff. And then of course, making sure that the plans that we are supporting and this academic plan that will eventually be written with all of this impact, that we have a clear and narrow focus, right? That we're not trying to do everything underneath the sun, but we're picking the most impactful high leverage strategies in order to improve our academic outcomes, as well as more color of staff, excuse me, more staff of color. And that really kind of dovetails into this idea of pipeline opportunities and leadership development, right? And making sure that as a district, we are working to provide leadership opportunities for all of our staff and particularly our staff of color. And then also this flexible scheduling, which is coming up a lot at the high school level, which speaks to the ability for our students to go off-site to get some real world experience and really have that flexibility within our high school schedules. Next slide. Pass it over to Miss Cindy Green to take on our non-traditional metrics.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. I want to just remind us of how we opened with Zamarian and really thinking about how we recognize brilliance, a student that navigates the world, and we think about our graduate vision and is able to figure out transportation and persevere in order to ensure that he is at school every day. And so with that, from all stakeholder groups, I know Kaylee really centered our scholar voice, but all stakeholder groups had pretty common themes across the board in terms of what they'd like us to focus on moving forward. But some of those non-traditional metrics beyond the academic reading and math scores that we know we need to focus on and we know are critically important for our students, we've heard thinking about things like demonstration of portfolios, thinking about more internship opportunities as a way to measure student success, authentic writing experiences, co-curriculars has come up across the board. We've heard many students say, hey, I have improved in soccer. Do you know that? Know me more than just what happens in my classroom. So really recognizing that as well. The graduate vision has come up many, many, many times with our stakeholder groups, really thinking about how students own their learning by doing their own goal setting, and really this other concept about kind of the developmental growth that is happening with our students over time. Next slide, please. So that's a quick update on themes to date. We are still in input phase, which has been really exciting. We have many more voices to hear from. As you know, we've kind of talked about how this will tie into our recalibration of our strategic framework. And so we're excited that we're going to start cookies in conversation with the superintendent. Originally, it started with coffee, but we're going to run them at nighttime, so people might not all want coffee. But we're going to really start these community input sessions where we're going to go out into the community, into our community spaces, and continue these conversations and continue to gather input. We also know that we had a historic moment a couple of weeks ago over at Holtzman where we did a land acknowledgement. And we also heard from our Indigenous families the importance of uplifting their voice. So we will do a session with our families tomorrow night there to hear their voice and any additional input that they want to add. We will be coming back to the board on a regular basis to provide updates as we continue to gather input before we put pen to paper on a final plan. So I'm going to stop there for our discussion before we just show a little bit of where we're going in June, but this is our last topic. So Savian, I will turn it back over to you, and Barb, if you could take us off screen share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That is great work and a good update. Definitely excited for things to come. Any board member questions or comments? Board member Nichols, followed by board member Muldrow.
Yes, thank you so much for the update. I'm wondering, this is more of a timeline question. How does the writing of the academic plan, the recalibration of the strategic framework, also set up schools for either their school improvement planning for the fall or their professional learning plans for the fall? Can you just talk, and if you've said this before in previous board meetings where I was not present, my apologies, but just wondering how all of this helps give schools the clarity they need and also will be a wonderful opportunity to kind of cast the vision.
Absolutely. Dr. Jenkins, would you like to start, or would you like me to start?
You can start and then I can close it up.
Absolutely. And I'll also open up to see if any of our associate superintendents want to add to this, as well as Kaylee. Thank you, Board Member Nichols. Great question. So they will all tie together when we have a final product and come to you in October, where we will have a final presentation. However, we know schools are in the kind of SIP or school improvement planning processes now. And so we have been working directly with our associate superintendents of schools, what we have heard to date from the academic plan and what we know schools need before the end of the year to think about a few priority areas that we need them to focus on, that we all need to focus on. I'll share with you kind of the draft of that, and you'll see the connection and know that this is still in progress. But we know, regardless of what we hear around the input for the academic plan, early literacy and beyond is going to be our focus. So we've been thinking about at the K-5 level, the implementation of our new materials as a focus point. And at secondary, really thinking about what that literacy implementation would look like. Simultaneously, we have heard from everybody the need to continue to center social emotional learning and our culture and climate as a key component for everything we do. So that is a second priority that we've been thinking about. And then the third is how we better engage our families and our communities with all of this work. So that's kind of where we are in terms of thinking about that and how we work to kind of stabilize some of the focus going into next year in terms of those three areas, while we are continuing to recalibrate and gather this input for the future, right? Because we're trying to think the long view as well. But let me see if Dr. Jenkins or anyone else wants to add to that too.
I will go ahead and add right here. Very nice job with that. The articulation of what we're trying to do to have this sense of coherence. Everything you're hearing is going back to all of this. The start, as Mrs. Green talked about, the strategic recalibration. And I just want to remind everybody, the framework we have, we think our strategic framework, goals, all those things are there. We're trying to go back now and put just a little bit more of meat based upon post-pandemic. What does it look like? We brought to the board Gail Anderson and some others in terms of helping us to facilitate this discussion in the community. We've already talked to a number of community people. We're going to start setting these meetings up, going out and getting their feedback, as you heard Mrs. Jackson talk about as well. And the timeline in which she gave you, we're going to be coming back to the board again in the end of July, again in August and September. And these are just preliminary, giving you updates, which you've been hearing about tonight. But that final plan is going to come before you, because you remember, this is going to be the 2040 plan. We're not just looking at next year. We're looking way beyond this. And so we're right in the, I would say, beyond even the infancy of it, but getting ready to go out into the community right now. And I think that's pretty much where we are. And someone else may want to add to that, but that's kind of it.
Thank you.
Can I have just one follow-up? Thank you for that. I think where I'm wondering, and I know I'm just stepping in and I've been trying to pay attention up till this point. So let me just see if I can clarify my thinking. So I'm hearing that there are some themes based on the input that you're gathering. So for instance, let's just go with the theme justice and belonging. I see a lot of bullet points under justice and belonging. What schools are hearing in terms of their planning for next year is to perhaps focus on social emotional learning, culture, and climate. In your mind, is that focus for the schools, does that feed back into this theme of justice and belonging? It does.
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Jenkins, sorry.
No, we're all in this together as we're co-creating this, but we're listening to not only our schools, but to the communities as well. And culture and climate, I'm glad you brought that up in that way. We are thinking about, this is the school improvement plan, which you also asked about, right?
Yeah, yep.
So we're meeting with them the end of this spring and in June for our academy, making sure that they have this work with their staff. Then they're coming back together as a leadership team, and we're all going to recalibrate on it. The work we're going to do, we're going to continue to do other work too over the summer. But yes, what you brought up will fit into justice and belonging.
Okay. And so, can I just ask one additional clarification? I'm sorry.
Are you good?
Will every school, from your knowledge, have some goal around rigorous and engaging learning? And will they, and then also have like a SEL or culture and climate? Because I heard you, Ms. Green, say like K-5 obviously will be focusing on the implementation of the new materials. I'm just wondering for the rest. And the reason I'm asking these questions, it's not to put you out there, but as we're recovering from the pandemic, and we know that students need continued investments and space for social emotional learning, mental health supports, artistic expression, all of that, right? And I think we also want to be able to convey that we're also just as serious about the academic piece. And so the reason I'm asking this is really more how we're conveying to our community that we're trying to attend to the whole child and have a balanced approach, as you might say. So I'm just curious about what's hanging out at the schools for them as the academic plan is still being developed.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Jenkins.
This is great. Let us have the associate superintendents who are on the ground, boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Having this kind of conversation that you're talking about right now. Let's have them step in, and then Mrs. Gray, if you want to take over from that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jenkins. I'll jump right in. Great question. Each one of those plans, we were very intentional to ensure that each plan married each other and spoke to each other so that we didn't have no lagging pieces out there. And so one plan informs the other. And so while co-creating with the schools, we keep the academic focus front and center while tending to the social and emotional needs of all our scholars.
Let me see if any of the other associate soups before I chime in. And I would just say more specifically, we are thinking, because this is draft, we are thinking that literacy would be that area, Nichelle, under the rigorous and engaging learning that we would want to center at all grade levels and think about that aligned to our district strategic goals. But we are in that conversation right now for that, but that is how we were going to parse out those larger umbrella components into something that is operationalized at the school and specific to the focused on academics and aligns with our district priority of early literacy and beyond.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Muldrow.
Yeah, so I don't have any questions and I don't need the administration to respond to my comments, but I do want to thank you all for the work you're doing specifically to center and highlight the voice of our young people. And I also want to acknowledge that one of the things that you all brought to our attention is that our young people are advocating for increased number and accessibility of gender inclusive bathrooms. And I think that we should all be very proud of our students because right now there is a national attack against trans students and non-binary students. And so for our young people to recognize the existence of our non-binary students and our trans students and their need for spaces where they are safe and affirmed within our schools, I think is incredibly powerful. I greatly appreciate you all doing that work and making sure that our young people have a voice at the table in terms of the conversation around what they need from their schools.
Thank you so much. And Board Member Gomez-Schmidt.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for continuing to bring this academic plan discussion back to us. I think what the way I'm thinking about this is we're trying to give some definition to our strategic framework beyond just those 3 goals that we've had. And really, you know, you're doing the work of engaging people at the ground level to figure out, and it feels like we need the piece in the middle. And so the pieces in the middle before have been the SIPs that Nichelle talked about, the English language learner plan, the special ed plan, like how all those things fit together and are integrated, I think are going to be a really essential part of whatever academic plan, because I am fully with you on having the literacy be one of our key focuses, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop doing math, right? And I know one area we need to really focus on is what we're doing with the middle school math sequence, because that is how we set up students for how they're accessing math at high school. And so I think that has to be in the academic plan too, right? And so how to put all these pieces and how we operationalize them for the way that schools function. I really appreciate Nichelle lifting that, and I can't quite wrap my head around how that's all going to look. But at the school level, it's the school improvement plans, and it's. But I thought we never did a really good job of helping the schools figure out how all the pieces fit together to meet all the needs of those different students in front of them. And so I'm hoping that we can get to that spot too, where we have something more high level for the board to react to, but that it connects for the real work that the schools do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Seeing no other hand.
Dr. Hicks.
Oh. Hey, Dr. Hicks, did you have anything for us?
Yes. Board Member, Vice Chair Castro, I would just like to say that the idea or the notion that it all fits together really centers around making sure that all of those pieces are there, but not so overwhelming that schools can't get to the work. So we're really trying to be intentional about having district goals there, but then also having autonomy within that of the strategies from the schools of how they get there. The other thing about this work is really when we talk about middle school, and you brought up middle school math, we're that contract is for math is the curriculum is going out, so we're in the process of beginning to do that work to look at math, which what you said. Board Member Gomez-Schmidt, just because it may or may not be written there does not mean we forget about math. I mean, math is important and a priority, and we're building the capacity for that. Also looking at at the middle school level, looking at literacy curriculum adoption, whether it's an ELA, humanities, or social studies. So that will also be a part of the process as well. So it's really about having a through line thread, right? Where we're being intentional about looking at literacy. We're also being intentional of we're saying we haven't fallen on a definite that culture and climate, and then also oh gosh, I'm having a brain freeze. Culture and climate.
family engagement.
Yeah, thank you. And family engagement. And all three of those are connected, from the literacy through, from family through culture and climate, which goes back to our goals, and also focusing in on high E squared, as we would say, humanity, intentionality, equity, and excellence as the pillars in the work and the through line for our scholars, our schools, and our families.
Thank you so much.
I'd add one thing that we heard from principals, and we actually just heard it this morning when we met at Toki with our APP group around the school improvement plan, was their desire to really have some clear flexibility within the parameters, which is what Dr. Hicks just spoke about, right? Understanding what our intentional focus areas are, right? Understanding that those are tight, and they're like, yeah, we completely agree that those need to be our focus areas. And then support us, this is where the flexibility comes in, support us in understanding what some of those strategies may be so that we can uplift literacy, so that we can uplift justice and belonging. So when we talk about school choice and we talk about autonomy and we talk about understanding that all of our schools are at very different points, right? They're at different places due to staffing, due to just number of students, due to the leadership, right? There has to be that ability to make some, to have some autonomy and flexibility, which is what you'll also see with these school improvement plans that are informed from the input that we're getting around the academic plan.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that flexibility. And I think it has to be balanced with the requirements that we know we are responsible for around those student groups like special education, English language learners, advanced learners. Those are all tied to like federal, state requirements for us to make sure that we're meeting the needs of those students. And I could name more than that too. There's a lot of different student groups and requirements. So yeah, the flexibility balanced with the accountability for making sure we're meeting those student needs. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands raised, I think moving on to forecasting June.
Yes. If Barb, if you could share the slides again, real quickly as we wrap up the night. I do want to just quote Dr. Gloria Latson-Billings that tells us, while everything is important, not everything can be a priority. And so we are really trying to keep that in mind as we focus on it. And Chris, I would just mention that what you just said is going to be really important in the school level goal setting that they do align to each priority area. Could you have the next slide, please, Barb? And one more. So as we come back in June, it will be the end of the year. So we are going to make sure we do a year in review. And I think most importantly, centering all of the amazing things that have happened this year and celebrating all of the work that our schools and our scholars have accomplished. We'll do another update on the academic plan in terms of input to date, what we've heard from our community sessions, as well as continuing that conversation around the at-risk plan that we started. Instruction chair Maya Pearson and I thought it was really important to keep that conversation going, and I heard that tonight. We'll have two policy updates for you that Sherry will also be bringing to the policy group. That is the one on wellness and our behavior education plan that will then be voted on later that month. And last, we will have an update on two high intensity partnership extensions that we will be bringing forth. That is our preview for June. It's a hefty month, so we're looking forward to going through everything with you a month from now. I will stop here and I will turn it over to either Dr. I'll turn it to Maya and then I'll let Savion.
Board Member Pearson.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, also don't forget you all that, if there are questions from here and there, like, you can definitely ask or contact one of us or from the team to kind of discuss it through. So just so that we understand, like, yes, we want to have as many questions so that we have a better presentation. Like always, we try to come up front with what we think may be asked in these meetings, just so that we can have all the information as possible. So just as a caveat before we move on to adjourning, hopefully soon.
All right, thank you. I move to adjourn this meeting. May I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Good evening, y'all.